I'm Callan. I'm the head of product and operations here at IdeaDrop. In that role, I am constantly seeking to identify and implement not just new product features that help our users, but also internal processes that can help us deliver even more value to all of our clients. And it would be great if we could stay connected. There are people from global organizations on this call today from a diverse range of industries. Let's stay in touch, connect, and share our experiences in a digital space on LinkedIn. If you haven't done so already, join our LinkedIn group. We will be sending through the link in the chat now. Should see a little pop-up, I think. And it'll also be sent in email follow-ups after this call. So a little bit about IdeaDrop then, if we've got some people on here who are not aware who we are and what we do. We are an idea management software that helps you discover, evaluate, refine, and execute the best ideas from anyone, anywhere. We help to make sure that your innovation program is structured in the best possible way to truly deliver impact for your organization. So what are we going to be doing today then? We're going to be highlighting key approaches and techniques to inspire proactive and engaged ideation through a culture of innovation. Okay, so the key focus today is culture. And I'm delighted to be joined by Nick Edgar, PSU commander at Cleveland Police. He's going to be giving us an inside look into the innovative culture that they are building at Cleveland Police. So big welcome to Nick.
Thank you.
So Nick's going to kick us off with his keynote presentation. And then after that, we're going to move to group exercises. So there's a few different pieces going on here. It should be pretty exciting. A little bit of a case study analysis, a little bit of a Q&A sort of survey type interactive session. So there's plenty for you to get involved in. And after that, we're going to open the floor up to you for Q&A. You can ask both myself and Nick any questions you would like. So key takeaways that I would like you all to have at the end of this session today. What does it take to create an inclusive culture, and why does it matter? How can you establish and sustain a culture of innovation within your organization? And how can you use idea management software to embed innovation within that culture? So with new technologies appearing almost daily against the backdrop of constantly changing client and consumer demands, the ability to innovate is critical. It's the only way to sustain business growth and a competitive edge. The best innovation strategies are guided by a fusion of these 6 things. And luckily for you, these are the topics of our 6 Pillars Innovation Event program. So if you're unlucky enough to have missed the first 2 this year, which were strategic goals and committed leadership, you've only missed the first 2 out of 6, so make sure you attend the next ones. But to quickly summarize them, strategic goals are critical. If you don't have a direction and a purpose for innovation, you're unlikely to be successful. Committed leadership, you need senior leaders to understand the importance of innovation and to adequately support it. And you need an empowered culture, the topic of today's call. We've overseen hundreds of global enterprise innovation programs. We've developed a proven impact plan that consistently delivers results and value. And at today's session, we're going to be looking into one of the most essential parts of that when you look at setting up your own innovation program, which is how do you empower your teams with the confidence, but also the responsibility to contribute ideas for your innovation program. So I think that's enough from me for now. I'm going to hand over to Nick Edgar now, and he's going to talk you through innovation and the culture they're building at Cleveland.
Thank you, Callan. And thank you to Anastasia and to IdeaDrop as well for being able to speak to you today. The key thrust of my presentation will be around how to create a culture of innovation. And I'll put one caveat on that, that you've got to be in this for the long haul. Changing mindsets and changing cultural mindsets specifically takes time. It takes motivation, it takes effort to do so. So in terms of expecting immediate results in terms of changing cultures and cultural mindsets towards innovation generally, it does take time. So please don't be frustrated by it if you're on that journey. We started that journey a couple of years ago with Ideas Drop, and it does take time. But we are starting to turn our pivot, our focus towards being more entrepreneurial and being more innovative, but it does take time to do that. So thank you for that introductory session or introductory notes to the session. So I'm going to lead through in very quick order, really. Anastasia, if you don't mind just passing over to the next slide. And I'm going to just talk about within the next 10 minutes, and it's going to be very much a whirlwind tour around creating cultures of innovation. Some of the things I'm going to talk about, some of the salient points are about respectfully challenging the status quo. Within a hierarchical organisation such as Cleveland Police, where we have discipline, order, structure, as you would expect within a public sector organisation, there is the latitude to show and demonstrate innovation and entrepreneurialism. It can happen, it does happen. But I think tied in with that, we do need to respectfully challenge the status quo. What we do now is not necessarily the right way of approaching things. What we have done in the past is not necessarily the correct approach to take. So when we're looking at the future, it's very important that we respectfully challenge conventional practice. Preordained convention is probably the right approach to take. And that is not being cynical, it is not being critical. It's simply having an approach that you can actually question and challenge and clarify why we're doing things in certain ways. The next aspect I'm going to talk about is creating a culture of curiosity. And this is very much about the ability to, sorry, apologies for that. I had two dogs making some noise and they're going to make a racket at the front door. So I appreciate, I should have thought about that before we started. But I'll just talk about creating a culture of curiosity, because this is about essentially being curious about why we do things. And I think that's part and parcel of what Ideas Drop is about. It's about saying that, you know what, we should always be challenging and curious about what we do. And we should never just accept convention as being as it is. The next aspect to it is the Sir Humphrey effect, really, which is about wrapping ourselves up in bureaucracy and risk aversion. And this is where I think we can always hide behind convention. We can always say, well, no, it's too difficult to try that. We shouldn't try that. It's too risky. What happens if it goes wrong? And I think the argument that I would have is, so what if it goes wrong? Everything doesn't work smoothly in life. All the things that we deal with don't necessarily play out in a correct order. And I think that links to the next two sections, which is around testing, targeting and tracking. And I owe that quotation to Lawrence Sherman, who's an academic in Cambridge, that we should always be able to target and track what we're doing to see whether it has benefits. But also the fact, and going back to, for those who can remember Eric Morecambe and Ernie Wise in the Morecambe Wise show, sometimes we always try to play the right notes, but not necessarily in the right order, which harks back to the Andre Previn sketch way back, I think, in the early 80s. So I think if there was a correct approach to innovation, then there would be no point in having Ideas Drop. There'd be no point in trying to innovate, because we would already have a correct approach to take on board. But there is no correct approach. Policing has many perennial issues to deal with. And those issues will never be resolved unless we have the ability of diversification of opinion, i.e. discussing the matter at hand. And secondly, being able to try things out and test things through an innovative approach. And I think when cultures or preordained attitudes do collide, where we have a staid culture, a culture where there is no progress, where there's no intervention, where there's no interaction with our employees, then history does tend to demonstrate that things can go horribly wrong. And we can have lack of innovation, lack of ability to change things for the common good and for the greater good. Anastasia, if you don't mind, I'll move on to the next section. So in relation to that, innovation is learning from failure as well as success. I'm sure Sir James Dyson would advocate that particular measure. You cannot have one without the other. Policing has sometimes been a little bit skeptical or a little bit reticent of having failure, but failure in whose mind, perception is very much key here. Someone may see something as a failure, others will see it as a success, but you've got to try things. And we've tried things from Ideas Drop, from some of the ideas we've had. Some of them work with intermittent success, some need a little bit more time to embed, but hey, go with it and try it out. I'll move on to the next slide. And I suppose from our point of view, it's really about evidence-based practice in terms of what works as well. So innovation and evidence-based practice for us in Cleveland are intrinsically linked. They are two sides of the same coin. And I think you can either take a dictatorial approach, which is like the headmaster or headmistress's approach, in terms of you will do this and you will follow, or we take the Aristotelian approach, which is very much about learning from excellence. The excellence is an act. Sorry, it's not an act, but it's a habit. It's a way of life. It's a way of doing things. And so we want our organization to be empowered to be, if you like, a cooperative of people working, pushing and pulling in the same direction. I'll move on to the next slide, if I may. So how are we doing this in terms of developing innovation and new cultural mindset within Cleveland? Well, first of all, with our colleagues with Idea Drop, it is very much about harnessing ideas across the length and breadth of the organization. That hasn't been necessarily easy to do because people have been a little bit reticent of sharing ideas because the fear of repercussions, ramifications, that they may be belittled, that their idea may not be taken seriously, that the idea may never get off the ground. But we've built in a cycle of continuous improvement through Lean Six Sigma partners across the organization. We are looking to recruit ambassadors or champions for Idea Drop across the organization. And we're threading or embedding as a golden thread within all of the things we do, organizational learning, innovation, and evidence-based practice. And I think what we're saying to people is that innovation is everyone's business, okay? We've had a number of ideas, some small, some bigger projects to try and deliver around drones and drone usage, even things like swap, sell, buy, which is sort of an internal eBay for ourselves within the policing organization, which has been well received. But what we're trying to do is create communities of practice. We want people to put ideas up there and allow their colleagues, their peers, to debate it, comment upon it, support it, offer an alternative opinion, and also collectively give some support to that. And the case study for that was What Three Words. What Three Words, if you're not aware, is an app you can download. It allows you, or allows certainly policing, to locate an individual that may be missing, at risk of harm, highly vulnerable. As you appreciate, we deal with a number of inquiries each day where these particular categories fit. And we have, using What Three Words, which was a direct descendant from Ideas Drop, a way of being able to protect people and safeguard the vulnerable. And we've actually located a number of individuals using What Three Words to actually prevent them from coming to serious harm. So it doesn't get any more serious than that when you're actually protecting life, and some of the things that have actually come from Ideas Drop as a result of that. I'll move on, Anastasia, if you don't mind. So the nature of innovation and evidence-based practice in Cleveland Police then is very much organic, evolutionary, and revolutionary. So we believe it's a long-term journey. We're not going to get innovation and the culture innovation embedded overnight. It doesn't happen that quickly. We will have people that are against it. We've had people, things playing out on Ideas Drop which would be more critical rather than innovative, because people actually use the opportunity through the cloaking function, for instance, to put an alternative viewpoint which may not be widely shared. But it is part of our democratic process that people are allowed to do that and feel empowered to do that. And that's a very important thing to do. I'll move on to the next slide. These are just some headline figures about Idea Drop within Cleveland. We introduced it in February 2019. Since that time, we've received 513 ideas. We've released 6 challenges. We're going to be releasing quite a number more this year. And I can't count the number of comments we've had from staff across the organization. We've got roughly 45% of our staff now registered onto Ideas Drop. Our aim is that we'll have 100% within the next 18 months. And that will give us even more leverage and power to allow people to comment, debate, as I said, building up communities of practice. If we think that senior leaders have all the answers for questions, that is not both unfair, but it's also unrealistic. Everybody across the organisation has and have good ideas to come forward. They just need the ability, the latitude, and the forum in which to do that. And Ideas Drop is exactly that particular forum. I'll move on to the next section, if you don't mind, which is how important we place innovation and entrepreneurialism within this. So within our enablers, encouraging innovation and improving services lies at the very heart of what we're trying to do. And as I say, we in Cleveland, we deal with an awful lot of serious violent crime. Like many other police forces around the country, we have our own priorities, our own thematics, our own particular issues to deal with. But out of all of those, we place an essential tenet of that aspect is around innovation and encouraging innovative practice. So it's not just a byword or a buzzword, it's something that we place significant influence and measures upon. I'll move on to the next slide, if I may, Anastasia. So really, this is my penultimate slide, to be fair, and it's my final slide before we move on to questions. To use the British Rail analogy, we're getting there, which is back in probably, I think, in the 80s or 90s. What I would say is we are getting there, but it is a journey. And I think you've got to be in it for the long haul. Policing can and is innovative. So it's not a question of really what we're asking people to do in Cleveland. It's not about what Cleveland can do for them. It's about what I can do for Cleveland Police, which is a slight variation from the John F. Kennedy speech back in the 60s. But what essentially it's saying is that everybody can influence change. Not just the senior leaders, not just the chief constable, but everyone within the organisation, from the mouse that lives in the floorboards in the police office to the chief constable himself and the police and crime commissioner. Everyone within that has power and autonomy to make a difference. We need to continue to develop a culture which encourages all officers and staff to contribute to improvements in service delivery, and places continuous improvement as an integral part of that. We've done a number of projects within Cleveland around vulnerability and safeguarding, child sexual exploitation, human trafficking, whatever it may be, which are very, very serious topics to deal with and have major effects on people's lives. But how we go about it is to actually tap into subject matter and practitioner expertise. That is the people on the ground that are doing that work day in, day out. Not just within our organisation, but with our partner agencies as well. To get their views, to garner their experiences and to gather their beliefs and ideas, Ideas Drop is a really good thing to do in relation to that. And finally, I'll leave with this sort of comment, if you like. Culture is a state of mind. We all have a difference of opinion about how things should be dealt with. We can all have an opinion about how we should deal with homicide or knife crime or gang violence. But the difference of opinion allows for divergence, but it also allows for people to come to reach common ground. So allowing departure from convention, freedom and security to tell it like it is, which can be done on Ideas Drop through cloaking or otherwise, allows people to put their views forward for a better, more improved, more efficient, more effective police service. And that's exactly what we are, because policing is about people. It's not about real estate or buildings or property. It's about people. We deal with people, and our people are, and I'm not being patronising, our most important asset vis-a-vis Ideas Drop. I'll leave it there because I think I've probably gone over by 10 minutes, Callan. I apologise for doing that. I also apologise to viewers. I've got two cockapoos in the background, and occasionally they see something outside and they start having a bit of a raucous fight with each other. So I just had to briefly interlude to break up the fight, which is probably not unusual when you're working in policing to do that. So I'll move on. Thank you. And any questions, I'm happy to take.
Great. Thanks, Nick. That was really insightful. I thought it was very insightful. I'm sure everyone else agrees. We're going to hold questions, I believe, until the very end. but if you have one on top of your mind, feel free to put it in the chat. And what we can do is we can run through them towards the end and make sure that we get to as many as possible. Okay, so let's, let me just share my screen again then. So, why does an innovative culture matter? I think Nick's covered it very well there. I'm going to just quickly highlight a couple of extra points. This question is important because it has to come first, right? The first step towards creating a culture of innovation is to understand why it's important and to crystallize its purpose. The core belief, the core benefit of an innovative culture transcends industry sector boundaries, as fundamentally it encompasses the trust that your organization has in the intelligence of your people. And beyond that trust, it shows an ambition to unlock those people's ideas and use them to define the future of your business. So we're going to do a little interactive thing here. So if you have your phone to hand, you can scan this QR code, and it is going to open up a web page where you can submit your answers to this question. What makes a culture innovative? So I'm going to give everyone just a minute or two to get that up, and then we'll see what everyone's responses are. We'll see what some of the common threads are, and then we'll sort of dissect it a little bit. So over to you guys. And if you see someone's put an idea up already, or a suggestion or an answer up already, and you think, oh, they've covered it, put yours up as well, because what this will do is it'll show common words or common themes more prominently in this word cloud. So just because someone's already said it doesn't mean that you agree with them, you shouldn't put it on as well. I'll give you another minute. But we're starting to see some results come through. I think that there's quite a lot of themes there that you've already touched on, Nick. The big one that I'm seeing very prominently is openness, and importantly, open communication. Some other ones that I'll pull out here, creativity, is there a few times, diversity, prepared to fail.
Yeah.
Anything else that's jumping out at you, Nick, that you're thinking is very pertinent?
Yeah, certainly empowerment, giving people the opportunity or the forum, the sounding board to tell, to explain. Safe base to share. Safety is a critical factor around culture. People could feel vulnerable and isolated within that, especially when you're sharing ideas that you're not quite sure what the reception will be like. So some really interesting aspects on there which link in with the experiences within Cleveland.
Yeah, I think that we all sort of understand what some of the universal elements are, but it seems like they're coming through very clearly here. There's a lot of people echoing what you've shared. So that's great. Keep them coming in. We might come back and revisit this slide later on. The last thing, I guess, let me just sort of touch on this a little bit, would be, I can't see it here, so I just want to highlight it as a possible thing that's missing, would be some of the norms. So a little aspect around behavioral norms and patterns of behavior. And I guess part of that is probably overlapped with some of the other elements, but, for example, if the norm is to not share, sometimes it can be harder than just telling people that they need to get in touch or they need to tell you to break that norm, especially if it's, I guess, unstated and like a subconscious norm that exists. Okay, we're going to start breaking out into the workshop then. So I'm really excited about this. I think it's going to be really, really good. We're going to use breakout rooms, I think. Let me just give you a quick summary, and then I think, Anastasia, you're going to split everyone off. Is that right? Great. Yeah. Okay. So each group is going to be given 2 worksheets, and you're going to have a short case study about a fictitious organization and the challenges that they are facing around organizational culture. So we want you to read through this case study together, and based on it, you're going to try and identify what you think that company is like right now. What is the current state of their organizational culture? What is it like to work there? How does it feel to be an employee working there? How does it feel to be a senior leader working there? And then we're going to talk a little bit about what steps would you take to move them along the path towards a more innovative culture, so that they can start to see success and I guess achieve the sort of impact that they want to, but it's step by step. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Anastasia. You're going to have, I think, 20 minutes on this. Is that right? Yeah, 20 minutes. And after that, we're going to come back together and we will discuss the ideas. So I'll see you all in a little bit. So what was the outcome of each of the groups then? Does anyone want to sort of present back what they talked about? Let's start with, what did we think about Apta Healthcare in its current state? What kind of organization is it? What does it feel like to work there?
I think some of the things that we touched on in group 3, Johnny Sam's group, was, well, they're obviously a market leader. They've been there for a long time. And when you're in that position, first of all, you've got more to lose. The downside risk of, risks you take is greater than if you're a small company. Also, your failures are far more public. They're far more, heard about. And also, we touched on an element of, is there institutional arrogance? So I kind of mentioned an article that's pretty popular about McKinsey and an institutional arrogance that apparently set in there that was affecting their work and affecting their ability to be introspective and judge themselves and so on and so on. So we spoke about those things. We also spoke about how a larger company may need to jump through more governance hoops, more kind of regulation and red tape. A smaller company, more agile in that sense. There's less oversight on them, so that they can kind of attack their problem in different ways. So yeah, that's a bit about what we thought of Apta. Do you want me to do? What does it? Yeah, and we
Yeah, that's great. Anything from group 3? What anything you want to layer in there? So that is.
So that was
my group.
That was your group. Apologies. Okay, I'll do our group then. Yeah, I think that there's some interesting things there you covered. I think the increased risk was a good point. Yes, Amanda, go ahead.
Yeah, Amanda from group 2. So my group felt like there was a culture clash between Apta and Techie Health, I believe. And the traditional organization wasn't really willing to merge, or at least some people on the team were not willing to move from their legacy processes to adopt more agile processes. We felt like there was a bit of distress in the merger, so a bit of insecurity going around. And even though they were partners, Apta felt threatened and weren't really willing to adopt to the digital transformation, at least part of the team, not everyone. So that was on how we felt Apta was like now. And also what it's like to work there.
Mhm.
So we felt like there was a lack of planning when it came to change management, how they handled the entire merger, the communication that could have been handled better. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would agree with all of that. The only thing from my group, which I think I'll layer in, was we talked about what do you think it feels like to work there from a few different people's perspective. And if you were one of the established company, you probably feel a bit threatened, right? And if you were the new startup that got bought and were promised funding to go and continue what you're doing even better, and then you experience this sort of clash of cultures when you arrive, I'm sure they're probably a little bit panicked and hesitant as well. So yeah, I think I would agree with all the other points. What about the steps to change it then? What did we sort of discover from the conversations?
I'm happy to. We can go same order. I mean, I can talk about that. So I think we made the point that at that initial stage, before the kind of companies have fused and before they've kind of the cultures have kind of melded together, it's a good opportunity to kind of get an unbiased view of the culture. So having a smaller company assess the bigger company's culture. You know, what do their processes look like? Why are some things, why do they do some things in a far more long-winded way than the smaller company does, and really kind of having a kind of side-by-side analysis of what they do. But critically, I think the things that we touched on, to facilitate that, but to facilitate any kind of knowledge transfer that isn't blocked by kind of ego or tribalism between the companies, is to kind of either, try really hard for it to be a transparent process, but technology and tools help that as well. So how can you use technology or tools or communications to basically encourage transparency with it, make it seem like this is an opportunity for everyone to improve, to develop. This is not about X being wrong and Y being right. This is just we've bought on this company because they clearly do something great. Let's learn from each other, because there are some things that we pros and cons of decisions we made, and some pros and cons of decisions you made. And yeah, so I think approaching it transparently.
That makes a lot of sense. I think we touched on the same thing about creating a culture map, right? So for both of the organizations today, and retrospectively looking a little bit back into their history to understand why they're like they are today, and then creating a shared map, taking the best bits of both, and creating a plan for the culture, right? Anything else to add from any of the other groups? Anybody at all? Feel free to just.
I can jump in for it too. Amanda did cover a lot of what we were talking about, but ours was more surrounding creating a process, because there was a lack of a plan to help merge and smooth that transition from those organizations there. So it was, how can we create that process to help smooth that transition of organizational culture, and have that buy-in from senior leadership to help support that plan and process and alignment there. So that was the key focus that we had, and ensure that it is communicated effectively and identify any risks by developing a risk management plan to coincide with those processes. So there were some key identifiers that we found which would tie into managing a good culture there.
I think any idea of merging the two cultures is probably a bad idea. I think when you try to merge two cultures, one wins and the other loses. And typically the big culture wins and the other one gets crushed. My advice to this company would be to let the acquisition run as an autonomous unit, completely independent with a separate culture, and not try to merge them, not impose the processes of the large company on the small one, because that will kill it. Cisco does this when it acquires companies. It lets them run autonomously. It doesn't try to merge them at all, because when you merge, the big culture crushes the small culture.
I think that's probably especially true in this case when you look at the sort of headcounts we're talking about, right? So what was it, 3,000 for the larger company and 50 for the small one? Yeah, there's only going to be one winner there, and especially if this larger company, which we would hope approach this with the intent to improve their core business as well. But if that's not the case, and they still want to see results, then that's definitely one option. Yeah.
I think it's a great proviso as well that, of course, it's a great opportunity. You don't want that the complete merging that you without any kind of pre-planning, or you might not want any merging, but it's the opportunity to self-reflect as a big organization, as a small one. You'd have very few kind of opportunities as an organization to do that with another organization, especially in the same space. So I think what Paul said there is completely correct, and as long as that's borne in mind when that kind of knowledge transfer occurs, then it's great.
Anyone else got any thoughts on that task?
Yeah, my view is kind of opposite to Paul's. I believe in a united culture, and it doesn't mean that they doesn't have to be an independent, innovative department. What that would cause is silo mentality. We want innovation to be permeated across the entire organization. So even in the larger organization, remember, an organization is not an entity, it's made up of people. I, as an employee, have an innovative idea in the bigger, larger organizations, but I don't have a avenue to contribute because I'm part of that larger organization, not on the acquired side. So we use the term democratize innovation management. So innovation is opened up to everybody in the organization, where they get to contribute to a campaign with gamification and rewards to help drive the culture. But it's managed as a department. So there's an innovation management department. And that's what I think should be the solution for the company. Slightly different to what Paul is saying.
Yeah, I think that the reality is, in a hypothetical case study, we don't have enough information to judge, do we? And it's deliberately broad so that we can hear different viewpoints on how it should work. I think that where you're probably right is that the large company has the intent to change, right? But they've made an acquisition. We don't know how expensive this acquisition is. They wouldn't necessarily want to sacrifice the effectiveness of that acquired company in their attempt to change their core proposition. We don't know, but it's a decision, you're right, that they would have to face. Yes, good points all around. I'm going to move us on to look at just sort of a quick summary then before we open up to Q&A. First thing that we sort of talked about is all about communication, right? So in the larger organization, their first problem was people weren't contributing, or that they didn't really feel like they had a voice. And many organizations have plenty of people willing to innovate, but because maybe they're unclear about the company's innovation ambitions, or maybe they just are afraid of failure, they do not feel comfortable contributing. And so I think a big part of it is saying, hey, we want your ideas. Here's a safe space where not only you can tell us your ideas, but you can just go and play. And below a certain cost cap threshold, maybe you say, any idea that you want to come up with, you don't have to go through a huge approval process. You just go through a smaller one if it's below a certain cost to implement, or has a certain value to cost ratio. That way everyone is empowered to make change without fear of failure. And eventually, over time, innovation becomes a way of doing things because of that atmosphere. So I think that's why we touched on a lot in our group. What does it feel like to work there? Because that really is the first thing you have to change. It's change what it feels like to work there. So culture should be empowering. So the second thing, once people are comfortable contributing, how do you make sure that their contributions are valuable, right? So Nick touched on this quite well, whereby the first thing they tried to do was make sure that everyone felt comfortable having a voice. And now they're starting to mature in their process, and it's going to become, because people are starting to get feedback, good ideas are getting implemented, bad ideas are not getting implemented. It's a feedback loop, right? And over time, the intelligence of your organization doesn't change, but their awareness of what does good ideas look like and what ideas is this company looking for, which ideas align to strategy, does improve. And the way that you can do that is communication, educating them about what good ideas look like, but also providing them with resources, right? So what information do they need? What, maybe it's new skills that they need. What contacts do they need? Who can you introduce them to so that their ideas become better aligned to your objectives? And the final thing that I'm going to touch on here is about collaboration balanced with accountability. So it's very easy to say decisions should be more collaborative. It's very easy to say all teams should be able to talk to all teams. If there's no accountability in place, it can often mean that you've just got noise, right? In order for this idea to become implemented and an innovation that is delivering value for a business, someone has to be accountable for its delivery. And there's many different models of doing this. It might be that you choose to say that the idea author themselves are accountable for their own ideas. It might be that you have a centralized innovation team and they are accountable for capturing and progressing ideas through a pipeline, working with the author, working with different people. But someone needs to be accountable, and the culture should make it easy for people to collaborate across teams, departments, and locations. So that's it from me. I think that the last thing I'm going to ask everyone to do is, again, we've all got good practice now at using the QR codes. If you get out your phones and give this one a scan, you'll be taken to IdeaDrop's public challenge page, and you can look at the public challenges we have open. And there's some really great prizes on offer for winning ideas. So I encourage you all to get involved. And they are all sort of macro in nature, ideas that can improve the world. So please do get involved in that. So final things would be a thank you from me for everyone's engagement today. Really good discussions. I'm now going to open up the floor to Q&A. We had a couple that were very good from people in my group. I think it was Rihanna, if you're still on the call.
Hello, yeah, thank you.
Want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. So I work as an innovator at a educational publishers. I joined the team about 9 months ago, and I've been exploring open innovation because when I joined, I kind of noticed it was lacking. It turns out that my team members had actually tried it out before, and it wasn't really a success. So they'd opened up a space where members of the company could submit ideas. And I don't think they necessarily got the caliber of ideas they were hoping for. So now the team, some of my teammates are quite anti-ideas and anti-open innovation, and definitely prefer having problems to be solved. So I don't necessarily agree with the kind of anti-ideas stance, because I think opening up innovation to everyone across the company is really important culturally. So I was just hoping to get some advice on how I could go about offering a counter argument to those people in my team who are slightly more anti-ideas.
Yeah, for sure. It's a really great question. And I think that it's something that can happen if there's not sort of sufficient buy-in at the highest level, and people don't understand the value. So being able to communicate back to them, a counter argument is important. It sounds to me like they've kind of pulled the plug at the end of the first stage, right? So they said to everyone, we want to hear from you, we want to hear your ideas. And then they didn't like some of the ideas, or the ideas weren't strategically aligned. And so instead of going through that coaching, instead of going through that refinement phase, they've kind of just said, all right, that's enough of that. I think that you can still do employee company-wide innovation schemes by offering a little bit of structure, right? So it might be that you ask them to contribute to a challenge, and the challenge explains the way that they should be contributing ideas. Maybe it's a specific structure. Maybe it's here's the problem I'm trying to solve. Here's my idea to solve it. Here's why I think it's important. Here's why I think it's urgent, let's say. But does that answer your question? I think, go on, Paul.
Yes, Rihanna, if the culture of the organization is risk averse and anti-ideas, then you cannot change it from your position. It's absolutely a leadership issue. You have to flag this to your manager and your manager's manager and say, look, we have this issue, people have this attitude, and the leader is the only person who can change a corporate culture. You can't change a culture from the middle. It's hard enough from the top. A CEO can change the culture of an organization. It's tough to do, but the CEO and the senior leadership team can do that. You can't win the argument on your own if you're one of the troops. It's absolutely a leadership issue, and the leaders have to stand up for innovation, and they have to articulate the argument as to why it's essential and what's needed and what needs to change in the culture to accept more risk, more ideas, more experimentation, more failure. They have to sell that. You can't sell it in your position. That would be my advice.
I think I would agree with that, in that you probably can't sell it to the entire organization. I do think that you can try to change minds of the people Paul's talking about, right? And it might be that, I don't know if you've done this already, but were all of the ideas bad? Like all of the public sourced ideas were bad?
I've not had access to them, but I guess the sort of feedback from the team was that it was things like fix the coffee machine on the 3rd floor. So that's why I can really see the potential value in setting up challenges so that people can contribute that idea, but within a sort of parameter that's set.
Yeah, exactly.
I
That's part of it. Sorry, go on.
Oh no, I think I would argue, even if you did receive a lot of suggestions like fix the coffee machine, I think the company should then fix the coffee machine and show people that their ideas and opinions actually do have value, rather than saying, oh, that's a meaningless suggestion. They should actually say, okay, that's a valid suggestion, act on it, and then people will feel more comfortable about bigger ideas that they might have that are heavier lifts and that involve more resources. But I think if the company says, oh, that's a stupid idea or unnecessary, then people will say, oh, well, anything I suggest is going to be poorly received. So I think companies, and again, it's not, unfortunately, not your role to act on it, but I think companies shouldn't disregard those insignificant types of things. I was at a company where we had a lot of those types of suggestions, and they acted on them, and people were very, very happy and felt far more engaged and like the company cared.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's on the companies. If they're going to ask people for ideas, then they should make sure they respond to them.
I think also that if you look at organizations that have traveled the idea journey, there's evolution. There is start from ideas not being great, and then they get from good, they get to better, and then eventually the good ones come out. But like someone mentioned there, it's really important to ensure that people can see that the ideas they've come up with are actually implemented. It gives them momentum to actually do better and think great ideas. Thank you.
I think, just to add as well, I think, and I was helping one of the clients with this, where, you know, they were getting a lot of ideas, but you know, it was a similar problem, and the kind of analogy I used was almost like a tap that you haven't turned on for a while. You're going to get a bit of the stagnant water before you get the real water, and I think, like Leslie says, it's, you know, whether consciously or subconsciously, for them it's almost a litmus test. It's like, I'm not going to go away and write a page long, you know, and really think about an idea, because you haven't done this and you haven't done this and this, and everyone's mentioned these things. So I think it's an element of kind of give, get, in a way, where, you know, you're solving these problems. Like, yes, this is part of it. It's cultural as well. We want you to be more engaged. We want you to retain you as employees, because we want you to contribute. We want you to own ideas and carry them forward and get recognized for those things. And then I think in a way, if you service those things, and it's something, Rihanna, that you can go back, is like, if you service those things and at the same time you set these challenges where you're kind of, here's your new coffee machine, and by the way, here's something else that we've put effort in. Here's our challenge, and there's going to be a challenge after it, and so we've spent a lot of time thinking about this. Do you want to contribute in the meantime? Yeah, good point about the coffee machine. So yeah, it's bringing them on board as well. You know,
have
to go with them,
earn their contribution, right?
Yeah,
it's not a given that someone is going to take time out of their BAU job to contribute to something which isn't in their BAU job. In some organizations, people will do that naturally, but it's because it's been earned through communication and, as you said, Leslie, understanding that they get listened to. When they speak, they're listened to. But yeah, it's a phased approach. Do anyone have any questions for Nick? I think there were a couple that were put in the chat in the other room, but I don't know if we've still got access to them. But if you do, speak up.
Callan, just to give people a chance to think, just echoing what people have said about culture. One of the integral parts around changing culture is around trust, both implicit and explicit. Certainly for me in Ideas Drop, I can only speak about the Cleveland perspective, that trust is a really key thing. So yes, we do have a number of small ideas placed, if you like, the coffee machine scenario. But I think what people are doing is using the opportunity to express an idea or view, and then seeing how it's met and received by the organization. And so it is important that we do reflect on both the smaller bits that go onto Ideas Drop as well as the larger aspects, because they're all equally of valid importance. And I think for us in Ideas Drop, it's very much about being honest with people. There are some things that are beyond our give, what we cannot deliver upon because of time, resource, costs involved in it. It is just impossible. But I've always adopted an approach with Ideas Drop of being honest with people and saying, look, these are the reasons why we can't do it. And you have the right to reply. We are a democracy. We live in a democratic organization where people can flow ideas through. And people will disagree and say, well, actually, I don't agree with that. I don't know why we can't do that. And so where those debates and where that trust is built, where that trust is diminished or where it disappears or dissipates is when we've got a real issue. And so people need explicit trust around how we deliver Idea Drop generally. One of the questions I did see on the chat was around what was your best idea. I've got to say, actually, we've never had an idea that saved us £50 million in one quick throw. It doesn't happen like that. Innovation is incremental. We've had lots of different ideas about IT, about fleet, all in their own right, and not necessarily the things that are going to be considered, massive, grandiose kind of things. But they all in their own way make a difference to how we police. They're all in their own way. If you build them up as an aggregate, they're quite a significant bulk and they're quite a significant thing. Small things like, for example, COVID. COVID has affected us, it's affected a lot of organizations. We've had a lot of ideas around COVID about how we can streamline our resources, how we can alter our approach to deal with COVID. A lot of those have been taken on board. In their own way, they're all small things, but in a big thing, in terms of the larger picture, they do have significant impact. So don't dismiss the small things. because it's the small things built as a continuum that actually have significant benefits for the organisation.
I think the one thing I'd layer in there, Nick, would be that I'm not surprised that you got a lot of interaction around COVID. And I'd be interested to know whether you think you would have achieved the same effect if the groundwork hadn't been laid beforehand and the trust had been built up. You know, do you think that because people knew that Idea Drop was a safe space to contribute, that when a crisis emerged, the time, I guess, to close that feedback loop was less?
We've had some very animated debates about how we police COVID on Idea Drop. That probably would never have taken place had we not got the forum. It may have taken place in other forums, but not necessarily publicly or widely available. What I would say about innovation and ideas is that
I think we might have lost Nick.
way of thinking.
Oh, no.
So when you push something to the limits, expect, you know, a little bit of resistance from that, because people think, hang on a minute, I've got an idea. This is the way I want to take it, and I'm not really necessarily interested in what other people have to say. Very few of those people in our organisation, I have to say, thankfully. A lot of people will just say, look, actually, I didn't really think of it in that way. So in terms of COVID, yes, we've had a lot of ideas. We've had a lot of debate about how we police it. But what that has done is engendered a culture of where you can speak and you can speak freely. As I said, it does take time, because what we're trying to do is build a community of practice where everybody across the organisation is subscribed to it. And then we have that ability to flow ideas, think about things in a very broad context. But as I said, culture is a thing that takes a while to change.
Absolutely. Okay, I think we've got time for one more question. If anyone wants to ask either myself, the Idea Drop team, or Nick, one last question.
I had one question, Mahadevan here. So just want to understand the experience pre-Idea Drop and post-Idea Drop. What was the change which you perceived? Are you able to really see a tangible change?
I think that it's a very interesting question. Pre-Ideas Drop, we didn't necessarily have forums where people could submit an idea that was then available and accessible to the entire organisation. The way that probably policing works is that if someone has an idea, they'll go and discuss it with their line manager. The line manager can be then the gatekeeper as to whether that idea gets raised at a high level or not. And some managers will have their own perceptions of whether they think that is a good idea. So if they don't think it's a good idea, it doesn't fit in with their reality, if you like, then it can easily be killed at birth, if I can use that term. So what Idea Drop is actually allows people to go straight onto the forum, to express an idea, allow others to comment upon it without having to go through a gatekeeping process. And by removing that gatekeeping process, you're actually empowering people to say what they think and how they feel. And that's the most important thing. So post Idea Drop, what it has probably done is opened up a Pandora's box, because we do have lots of debate and discussion around different aspects, as you're probably well aware. And of course, it's then trying to make sense of it. So there are times where you think, do you know what, it'd be easier if we just went back to pre-Idea Drop, because we wouldn't have those difficult discussions and some of these animated debates. But that is so important for us to do that, because it's a way for the organisation to vent its own, to release pressure in different departments and to explain things, how things are. And it allows for discussion to take place across a very wide level. We do not work in silos. It's important that we don't have silo working, because one department might have a different opinion to another department. But Idea Drop, what it's done is it's brought people together and say, do you know what? I know what you're saying, but actually in our department, it's a bit of a different thing. Those discussions may never have taken place, particularly during COVID, where you've got social distancing, online working, agile working, all those things that tend to scupper the abilities to speak with people face to face. Idea Drop has probably filled a vacuum in that respect.
Fantastic. Thanks, Nick.
Great. Okay. I think let's wrap it up there then. Thank you very much for everyone for joining. Thank you very much, Nick, for sharing your experience and for taking the time to answer everyone's questions. I hope that everyone found it informative. I'll do one last plug for our public open innovation challenges. They're on a few different topics, including the future of healthcare, economy, work. We believe that none of the world's problems are insurmountable. They just need right ideas and the right process to implement them. So please do get involved. But other than that, thanks for everyone for joining, and we hope to see you at the next event, which I believe is in a few months' time. And hope to see you all then. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.